The murder of Melville Watson, 1914. Thomas Sims, the landlord of the Horse and Jockey on Leabrooks Road, Somercotes, is probably the most infamous of all landlords in the ALFRETON area. In 1914 he murdered Melville Watson, a partner in the firm of W.M. Watson and Sons, Auctioneers on King Street, ALFRETON, and then whilst still at the scene of the murder Sims committed suicide. This event was widely published in the newspapers. Following is a full transcript of the coroner's inquest into the incident as published in the Derby Daily Telegraph on the 18th of June, 1914, the ALFRETON Tragedy, Day's Inquest, Brothers' Graphic Story, Wilful Murder and FELO de se, a term denoting an illegal act of suicide. The coroner for the district, Dr. A. Green, of Chesterfield, held his inquiry this Thursday afternoon into the circumstances attending the terrible tragedy which was enacted at ALFRETON on Wednesday morning, and which caused such a sensation throughout the whole county. Both the victims were well known in the locality, Mr. Melville Watson, a partner in a well-known business firm, and his murderer Thomas Sims, not only as landlord of the Horse and Jockey in Somercotes, but also as belonging to a family long connected with the farming industry in the same district. The proceedings took place in the billiard-room at the George Hotel, ALFRETON, and it was inconveniently crowded with jurors, the general public, and newspapermen. The coroner, at the outset, briefly outlined the story of the crime, and said they would no doubt like to express their sympathy with Mr. Watson's relatives in their terrible bereavement. Inasmuch as both men were dead, and no further proceedings could possibly be taken, it would not be necessary to go into all the facts, and it would be sufficient for the purposes of this inquiry to accept the general story. Arthur William Watson was the first witness. He said he was managing clerk to the firm of William Watson and Sons, Auctioneers and Valuers, ALFRETON, of which Mr. Melville Watson, his brother, was a partner. His brother was 45 years of age. Witness was in his own private office adjoining Mr. Melville Watson's room when the tragedy occurred. This was about 10 a.m. The witness did not know that Sims was there until he heard his voice. The coroner, was he speaking in angry tones? Witness, no, he seemed to be speaking in ordinary language. They were in the passage just outside witness's brother's office door. The telephone was there. Sims had visited the office before on business, but he was not a frequent visitor. Suddenly, witness heard 3 shots in quick succession, and jumping from his stool rushed into the passage. He saw Sims standing near the telephone, and catching hold of him swung him round to pull him out of the way while he looked round for his brother. While witness had hold of him, Sims put a revolver to his head and fired. Did you leave hold of him? I don't know what happened then. I left Sims to look after my brother, whom I found lying on his back in the passage, bleeding from the mouth. Witness added that until the doctor told him he did not know that Sims was dead. Witness thought Sims was going away when the tragedy occurred. Do you know of any grievance which this man Sims had with your brother? I think he had an imaginary grievance, but am not sufficiently acquainted with the circumstances. It has been said that the trouble was about a valuation, but that was not true, as my brother never made any valuation for Sims at all. The coroner said, all sorts of rumours get about at these times. Witness, I can tell you what I know of the matter between my brother and Sims. Sims took a farm under my brother, and then gave it up. Do you know anything of the character of the man Sims? I have known him from a boy. Would you say he was a man with a hot temper? He was the last man I should expect to commit an act of this kind. I have never seen him in a temper, and this thing seems to me to be foreign to his nature. If I was to express an opinion, I should say he was mad with drink. Was he a hard drinker? I should not like to say that. He was in very low circumstances, and was no doubt troubled in his mind about his private concerns. Did he borrow money from your brother? I do not think so. There are many stories about which are wrong. When my brother bought Carnfield Hall about 3 years ago, he also bought some farmland adjoining. Sims was leaving his farm on the estate, and he applied to my brother for the tenancy of a portion of the land which my brother had bought. He made an offer as to the rent, and my brother accepted it. There being no houses on the land, my brother agreed to build one within a year. The tenancy agreement was signed, and a deposit of £50 was paid by Sims. There was a clause in the agreement that if he did not carry out the contract this would be forfeited, which was the usual course in an agreement of this kind. Sims came to the office some time afterwards, and voluntarily surrendered the tenancy. Sims saw me personally, and asked me about the £50 deposit. I told him I must see my brother, and he said he supposed he would get something. I said that in all probability he would. I reported my conversation to my brother, who had since made Mr. Sims a substantial offer in settlement. Sims thought he should have had the whole of the £50 back. My brother offered him £30, and I knew that he had lost something through Sims breaking the contract. For instance, he had to let the same land to another tenant at 2 shillings and 6d per acre less than Sims had agreed to pay. This was the only business transaction with the man which my brother had at any time. Mrs. Annie Mary Sims identified the body as that of Thomas, her husband, who was 33 years of age. He had been ill for some time past. He was all right as to his mind. He had not been drinking heavily of late, and when he left home at 10 minutes to 9 on Thursday morning he was quite sober and of cheerful demeanour. Witness knew that he had some business to do with Mr. Melville Watson, but had never heard him say anything threatening about him. She was not aware that he had a revolver in his possession, and could not say how he came to get it. The coroner at this point asked if there was any evidence to show how Sims became possessed of the revolver, and Superintendent Fennell replied in the negative. Every inquiry had been made on the point, but without result. Witness, continuing, said she did not think anything was wrong with her husband mentally, but, pressed by the coroner, she added that one of his sisters had been in an asylum for 2 years. Walter Percival Whittle, a clerk the employ of Messrs. Watson and Sons, said he was in the office when the tragedy occurred. He corroborated the details given by Mr. Arthur Watson in his evidence. When witness was attracted into the passage by the sound of the revolver shot, he saw Mr. Arthur Watson swinging Sims round. Witness, proceeding, said he saw Sims put the revolver to his head and fire, and then witness went to the assistance of Mr. Melville Watson, who was lying in the passage. When Sims came to the office he asked to see Mr. Melville Watson, but did not state what his business was. He appeared to be sober, and there was certainly nothing in his manner to excite suspicion. As far as witness could judge, the conversation between Sims and Mr. Melville Watson was conducted in an ordinary way, and there seemed no undue excitement. Sidney Baker, collier of Somercotes, said he was a personal friend of Sims. On Wednesday morning witness met Sims, and on his invitation agreed to walk with him to Alfreton. He was as usual, and although sometimes quick-tempered was no worse in this respect than most people. They called at a public house and had half a pint of beer each, and Sims produced from his pocket a bottle containing whiskey, out of which they both drank. Sims also showed witness a number of cartridges, but he did not show him a revolver. Witness did not recognize them as revolver cartridges, but thought they were for use in a rifle. On the way to Alfreton they talked about various subjects, chiefly horse racing, but there was no mention by Sims of Mr. Watson. Sims was certainly not the worse for drink. When they reached Alfreton the witness waited outside Mr. Watson's office while Sims went inside. 5 or 10 minutes later witness heard the sound of shots, and saw people running to Mr. Watson's office door. Witness went into the office and saw Sims lying apparently dead. Witness then went to Somercotes and broke the news to Mrs. Sims. Had Mr. Sims been drinking lately? To tell you the truth, he was always drinking, but on Wednesday morning he did not show any signs of it. He was jolly as usual, and seemed all right. Dr. Sidney Bingham, of Alfreton, spoke to being called to Mr. Watson's office on Wednesday morning shortly after 10 o'clock. He saw Sims lying on the floor of the outer office quite dead. In the passage witness saw Mr. Arthur Watson supporting the head of his brother. Witness afterwards traced the course of the bullets in the body of Mr. Watson. There were 3 wounds in the neck and chest, but any of the wounds might have proved fatal. Witness had heard all the evidence, and could find nothing in it to convince him that Sims was insane at the time of the tragedy. He had made superficial examination of the body of Sims, and had found a wound on the right temple, which was quite enough to cause death. Police Constable Clerk of Alfreton spoke to being called to Mr. Watson's office and having described the positions of the bodies, mentioned that he found the revolver, which he produced, close by the right hand of Sims, who was on the floor in the outer office. In the revolver he found 1 live cartridge, whilst beside him were 4 or 5 discharged cartridges. Police Constable Lowe spoke of having searched the clothing of the man Sims. He found no letters or documents upon him which threw any light upon the tragedy. He found a number of live cartridges in the man's pocket, which were similar to that found in the revolver. He had made inquiries in the neighborhood but was unable to ascertain where the cartridges were obtained from. From one document he found that Sims had at one time been in the Derbyshire Imperial Yeomanry. There was also a small bottle half full of whiskey in his possession. There was, as he had before mentioned, nothing else upon him to throw any light upon the tragedy. Mrs. Sims recalled, said her husband had been in the yeomanry for about 3 years. The coroner, addressing the jury, said it was quite clear from the evidence that Mr. Melville Watson had been prepared to treat Mr. Sims fairly in the matter of his business. It was also clear that the mental condition of Sims was normal when he called, and that he was sober at the time. The only thing which could be urged in the favour of Sims was the utter absence of motive, for he could have had none, unless he had some imaginary grievance against Mr. Watson. But Sims had never told anybody of any grievance, nor any cause for anger, not even to his wife. A verdict of wilful murder against Sims was returned in the case of Mr. Watson, and in the case of Sims it was FELO de se, an illegal act of suicide. Years later, I recall chatting to well-known boxer Billy Shinfield. Billy recalled the incident very well. He was on his way home from school and saw the police carrying the bodies into the town hall on the high street. It was a gruesome sight, he said. Blood was dripping from the blanket-covered stretchers onto the pavement. Billy ran home to tell his father Nehemiah Shinfield, who had recently bought at auction 5 houses which make up Raglan Street. He had paid in cash to Mr. Watson the sum of £982 and 10 shillings. Nehemiah was shocked and wondered if the houses would ever be his property or if the money was lost forever. Eventually Nehemiah did receive the properties, but only after a very long delay. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more videos. Thank you.